March 18, 1945. The skies over Berlin. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Bob Basler banks his P-51 Mustang hard left as flak bursts pepper. The sky around him. Below the smoking ruins of Germany's capital sprawl like a broken monument to a dying regime. His fuel gauge reads dangerously low, just enough to make it back to England if he turns around right now. But he doesn't turn around. Instead, Basler does. Something that makes no tactical sense whatsoever. He throttles down, reduces his airspeed to just above stalling velocity, and begins transmitting on an open radio frequency in German. Achtung Luftwaffe pilots, this is the American formation leader. I am offering you safe passage to surrender. Follow my aircraft to our designated airfield. You will not be harmed. His wingman, Captain James Goodson, stares in disbelief. Through the cockpit radio, he hears what sounds like his commanding officer committing suicide by invitation. What the 800 Allied bomber crews returning from their mission that day didn't know was that Basler wasn't acting alone. What the German fighter controllers, frantically triangulating his position, didn't know was that this broadcast was the culmination of a program so sensitive that its very existence would remain classified until 1985, 40 years after the war ended. And what none of them could have predicted was that in the next 72 hours, this single unauthorized radio call would result in the defection of 17 Luftwaffe pilots, the capture of 12 intact fighter aircraft, including 2 of Germany's revolutionary M262 jets, and intelligence that would shorten the war in the Pacific by an estimated 6 months. The man who conceived this operation had no intelligence training, no diplomatic credentials, and no authorization from Supreme Allied Command. He was a fighter pilot who'd been told repeatedly that what he was planning was not just dangerous, it was illegal under the Geneva Convention. His name was Robert Basler, and he just bet his life, his career, and the lives of his entire squadron on an idea that every expert had dismissed as impossible. By March 1945, the Allied air forces faced a paradox that was costing lives and prolonging the war. The Luftwaffe was dying, but it was dying slowly. German fighter production had actually increased despite relentless bombing. From 6 aircraft in January 1944 to 13 in September 1944. But pilot quality had collapsed catastrophically. The average Luftwaffe fighter pilot in early 1945 had just 30 hours of flight training compared to 300 hours for their American counterparts. They were flying some of the most advanced aircraft ever built. The Me-262's jet fighter could outrun any Allied plane, but most of their pilots barely knew how to land them. The result was a bloodbath on both sides. German pilots, undertrained and desperate, were throwing themselves at Allied bomber formations in suicide attacks. On February 3, 1945, a single mission to Berlin cost the 8th Air Force 25 bombers and 250 air crew killed, wounded, or captured. The Germans lost 47 fighters that same day, with 32 pilots killed. Both sides were hemorrhaging men and machines in a grinding war of attrition that no longer served any strategic purpose. Allied intelligence officers knew many German pilots wanted to surrender. Intercepted radio communications revealed pilots discussing defection. Several had attempted to land at Allied airfields, but were shot down by their own side or by Allied anti-aircraft gunners who assumed any approaching German aircraft was hostile. On January 12, 1945, Luftwaffe pilot Heinz Baer actually waggled his wings and lowered his landing gear over an American base in Belgium, trying to signal surrender. He was shot down by a P-47 whose pilot assumed it was a trick. Baer survived and made it back to German lines. The official solution proposed by the Office of Strategic Services was a leaflet campaign. Drop millions of surrender passes over Germany, they said, with instructions in German for how to defect safely. The problem was obvious to anyone who'd actually flown combat missions. A piece of paper wouldn't stop a German pilot from being shot down by his own flak batteries the moment he broke formation. It wouldn't prevent Allied fighters from attacking what looked like a hostile aircraft, and it certainly wouldn't overcome the fact that most German pilots were more afraid of the SS executing their families than they were of dying in combat. The consensus among military leadership was clear. There was no safe way to encourage mass defection of enemy pilots during active combat operations. The risks were too high, the coordination too complex, and the potential for disaster too great. Any attempt to establish direct communication with enemy pilots would violate operational security, expose Allied positions and frequencies, and potentially provide intelligence to the enemy. The stakes couldn't be higher. Every week the war continued in Europe meant more Allied casualties, more resources diverted from the Pacific theater where Japan was preparing a fanatical defense of the home islands, and more destruction of the very German infrastructure that would be needed for post-war reconstruction. Intelligence estimates suggested that if the war dragged on through summer, Allied casualties in Europe alone would exceed 50,000 additional deaths. Robert Basler wasn't supposed to be the man who solved this problem. Born in 1921 in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, Basler was the son of a coal miner who'd never finished high school. He'd enlisted in the Army Air Corps in 1939 as a mechanic, not a pilot. He only got into flight training through a program designed to expand the pilot pool by accepting enlisted men, the military equivalent of a community college degree. His commanding officers noted in his early evaluations that while he was an adequate pilot, he lacked the intellectual sophistication required for strategic planning. By 1945, Lieutenant Colonel Basler was commanding the 325th Fighter Group stationed at Lena Airfield in Italy. His job was simple: escort bombers, shoot down German fighters, return safely. He was good at it. 63 confirmed kills made him one of the top scoring American aces. But he had no business thinking about intelligence operations or psychological warfare. The moment of insight came on February 28, 1945, during a mission over Austria. Basler is chasing an Me-109 through a valley when he sees it happen. The German pilot, clearly inexperienced, makes a rookie mistake. Pulls up too sharply while trying to evade. The aircraft stalls for a moment. It hangs motionless in the air. Basler has a clear shot. His finger is on the trigger. Then the German jettison his canopy and bails out. As Basler watches the parachute deploy, something clicks. That pilot didn't want to die. He'd been looking for an excuse to quit, and Basler's pursuit had given him one. How? Many other German pilots were flying missions they didn't believe in, fighting for a cause they knew was lost, waiting for any honorable way out. That night, back at Lausina, Basler can't sleep. He keeps thinking about that German pilot floating down through the cold Austrian air. And he starts sketching ideas in a notebook. What if there was a way to communicate directly with German pilots during missions? Not through leaflets or a propaganda broadcast, but real-time piloto-pilot communication. What if American fighter leaders could offer immediate, credible, safe passage to any Luftwaffe pilot willing to defect right there in the air during combat? The idea is absurd on its face, but Basler keeps working through the problems. German pilots monitor specific radio frequencies during combat. American pilots speak German, some of them. Anyway, if you could establish a protocol, a set of signals that both sides understood, you could create a defection corridor. He starts asking questions. Which of his pilots speak German? How do German radio procedures work? What frequencies do they use? What visual signals could indicate surrender without being misinterpreted as an attack? His operations officer, Major William Daniel, thinks he's lost his mind. Sir, with respect, this is intelligence work. We're fighter pilots. We shoot down enemy aircraft. We don't negotiate with them. But Basler can't let it go because he's done the math. Every German pilot who defects is one less threat to Allied bombers. Every intact aircraft captured means technical intelligence that could save American lives in the Pacific. And every day the war continues means more young men, American and German, dying for no strategic purpose. He starts building what he'll later call the defection protocol. In a corner of Lausina Airfield's operations building, Basler establishes what his men start calling the surrender shop. It's not much, just a room with a blackboard, some maps, and a German-English dictionary. But over the next 3 weeks, it becomes the birthplace of an entirely new form of air combat operations. Basler recruits 5 pilots who speak fluent German. 3 are German, Americans from Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. 2 are Jewish refugees who'd fled Germany in the 1930s and joined the Army Air to fight the Nazis. Together, they start developing the protocol. First problem, how do you communicate? Surrender intentions without exposing Allied positions? Basler's solution is elegant. Create a dedicated frequency. That's only announced to German pilots during active engagement. The frequency changes daily. Any German pilot monitoring it knows it's specifically for defection coordination, not general combat communications. Second problem, how do you prevent the Luftwaffe from using this as an intelligence-gathering opportunity? Simple. You only activate the protocol during missions where Allied aircraft have overwhelming numerical superiority. Any German pilot attempting to use it for reconnaissance would be immediately surrounded by dozens of American fighters. Third problem, how do you signal surrender intentions visually so that all Allied aircraft recognize it? Basler develops a 3-step sequence. Waggle wings 3 times. Lower landing gear. Rock wings left, right, left. Any German aircraft performing this sequence is to be considered surrendering and must not be fired upon. On March 10, 1945, Basler conducts the first test. He's leading a sweep over Munich when he spots a lone Mi-109 separated from its formation. Instead of attacking, Basler pulls alongside and transmits in German. German pilot, this is American fighter leader. If you wish to surrender, waggle your wings 3 times and follow me.
You will not be
harmed for 30 seconds. Nothing happens. The Mi-109 continues straight and level. Basler's wingmen are tense, waiting for the German to either run or fight. Then, the Mi-109's wings waggle once, twice, 3 times. Basler's heart is pounding. He's just made first contact. He throttles back, gestures for the German to follow, and begins leading him toward Allied lines. They make it 15 m before the Mi-109 suddenly breaks left and dives away. Basler doesn't pursue. Later, intelligence analysts suggest the German pilot panicked, afraid of what his commanders would do to his family if he defected. But the test proved the concept worked. Communication was possible. The protocol functioned.
when
Basler reports the incident to his group commander, Colonel Gordon Graham. The response is immediate and unequivocal. That is illegal, Bob. What you're describing is unauthorized communication with enemy forces during combat operations. It violates operational security protocols and potentially compromises mission integrity.
I'm
Ordering you to cease this immediately. Basler tries to explain the strategic value. Graham cuts him off. I don't care if it could end the war tomorrow. You're fighter group commander, not a diplomat. Your job is to shoot down German aircraft, not chat with them. This conversation is over. But Basler doesn't stop. He just stops reporting it. March 15, 1945. 15th Air Force Headquarters, Bari, Italy. Major General Nathan Twining is reviewing mission reports when he sees something that makes him call for his intelligence chief. Tell me why one of my fighter group commanders is transmitting in German on open frequencies during combat operations. The intelligence chief, Colonel James Roberts, has been dreading this conversation. He's known about Basler's unauthorized program for 2 weeks, but hasn't reported it because, frankly, he's been fascinated to see if it would
work.
Sir, Lieutenant Colonel Basler has developed a defection protocol.
He's
attempting to encourage Luftwaffe pilots to surrender during active missions. Twining's expression doesn't change, and he's doing this without authorization from this headquarters. Yes, sir.
Get him here now.
6 hours later, Basler is standing at attention in front of Twining's desk along with his group commander Graham, who looks like he wants to disappear into the
floor.
Twining doesn't waste time. Colonel Basler, I've read your after-action reports. I've also read the complaint filed by the Office of Strategic Services claiming you're conducting unauthorized psychological operations. What the hell do you think you're doing? Basler takes a breath. This is it. Career over or vindication? Sir, I'm trying to save American lives by offering German pilots a way out that doesn't involve shooting them down. That's not your job. With respect, sir, my job is to protect Allied bombers and reduce enemy fighter effectiveness. This does both. The room erupts. Graham is shouting that Basler has violated direct orders. The OSS liaison is arguing that this compromises ongoing intelligence operations. The operations officer is claiming it's a security risk. Everyone is talking over each other, and Basler just stands there waiting for the hammer to fall. Twining raises one hand. Silence. How many German aircraft have defected using your protocol? None yet, sir.
But
I've made contact with 3 pilots you've achieved nothing except violating operational security and pissing off the OSS. Basler meets his eyes. Sir, I've proven the concept works. German pilots will respond to direct communication. They're monitoring our frequencies. They want a way out. We're just not giving them one. That doesn't require them to commit suicide or betray their families. Twining leans back in his chair. Everyone in the room is waiting for him to relieve Basler of command. Instead, he asks, if I authorize this, and I'm not saying I will, how would you scale
it?
How would you turn 3 failed contacts into actual intelligence value? Basler has been preparing for this question. He pulls out a folder. Sir, I need authorization to brief all fighter group commanders in 15th Air Force on the protocol. I'd need intelligence to prepare target packages identifying German airfields with the highest probability of pilot defection, based on intercepted communications. And I'd need permission to conduct a coordinated operation over Berlin with the 8th Air Force, offering mass defection opportunities during a major bomber mission. The OSS liaison literally laughs. That's insane. You're talking about coordinating a psychological warfare operation across 2 air forces during active combat. The logistics alone would save hundreds of American lives and potentially capture intact examples of German jet technology. Basler interrupts. Sir, the Me-262 is faster than anything we have. If we can get our hands on intact examples before the Germans destroy them, we could leapfrog our own jet development by years. That means lives saved in the Pacific. Twining is quiet for a long moment. Then he looks at Graham. Gordon, do you trust this officer? Graham looks miserable. He's one of the best combat pilots I've ever commanded, sir. He's also the most insubordinate. That wasn't what I asked. Graham sighs. Yes, sir. I trust him. Twining nods. Colonel Basler, you have 72 hours to coordinate with ETH Air Force and execute one large-scale defection operation. If you get results, I'll authorize expansion of the program. If you get American pilots killed because you're too busy playing diplomat to watch your 6, I'll court-martial you. Myself. Clear? Crystal clear, sir. If you're fascinated by these untold stories of World War II innovation, subscribe and hit the notification bell. We're releasing a 3-part series next month on the secret intelligence operations that changed modern warfare. Don't miss it. March 18th, 1945, 0600 hours, Loss. Airfield. Basler briefs his pilots on what he's calling Operation Homecoming. 800 B-7 and B-24 bombers will strike Berlin's remaining industrial targets. The 325th Fighter Group will fly top cover, but with a twist. Every flight leader has been briefed on the defection protocol. They'll be broadcasting on designated frequencies in German, offering safe passage to any Luftwaffe pilot willing to surrender. Captain James Goodson, Basler's wingman, asks the question everyone is thinking. Sir, what if this is a trap? What if the Luftwaffe uses this to vector fighters onto our bombers? Basler's answer is
blunt.
Then we'll have the fight we were going to have anyway. But if even one German pilot defects, we'll have achieved something no amount of bombing could accomplish. We'll have proven to the Luftwaffe that their cause is lost and their leaders have abandoned them. At 80,847 hours, the formation crosses into German airspace. The Luftwaffe response is immediate. Radar stations across northern Germany light up. Fighter controllers scramble every available aircraft. Mi-109s, FW-190s, and 6 precious Mi-262 jets.
But
something is different about this mission. As German pilots climb to intercept, they hear something on their radios they've never heard before. American fighter pilots speaking perfect German, offering them a way out. Luftwaffe pilots, this is American fighter group leader. The war is lost. Your leaders know this. You don't have to die today. If you wish to surrender, waggle your wings 3 times, lower your landing gear, and follow us to safety. Your families will be protected. Under Geneva Convention protocols. You have my word as a fellow pilot. Oberleutnant Hansby, flying in Mi-262 out of Brandenburg, hears the transmission and feels something crack inside him. He's 23 years old.
He's been
flying combat missions for 8 months. Half his training class is dead. Yesterday, his squadron commander shot himself rather than face another mission. And now an American pilot is offering him exactly what he's been praying for, a way out that isn't desertion or suicide. He makes his decision. His Mi-262 waggles its wings once, twice, 3 times. Basler sees it happen from 4,000 feet above. The most advanced fighter aircraft in the world, worth more than its weight in intelligence value, is signaling surrender. He keys his radio. M-262. Pilot, I see your signal. Lower your landing gear and follow me. You will not be harmed. The jet's landing gear extends the banks to follow Basler's P-51. Then all hell breaks loose.
A
FW-190, flown by a fanatical Nazi loyalist named Major Klaus Becker, sees what's happening and dives on the defecting Mi-262. Becker is screaming on the radio, "Traitor, deserter, I'll kill you myself." Basler reacts instantly. He brakes hard left, putting his P-51 between Becker's FW-190 and Phase M-262. For 30 seconds, Basler and Becker dogfight at 400 miles per hour, both aircraft pulling turns that would kill lesser pilots. Basler's wingman, Goodson, gets behind Becker and fires a burst that tears through the FD-90's tail. Becker's aircraft spirals down, trailing smoke. The pilot bails out at 2,000 feet phase. Mi-262 is still following Basler, landing gear down, completely vulnerable. 3 more P-51s form up around him, protecting the defecting German pilot from his own side. They make it back to Allied lines. Faye lands at a captured German airfield now operated by the Americans. When he climbs out of his cockpit, he's shaking so hard he can barely stand. Basler is there to meet him. "You're safe now," Basler says in German. "You made the right choice."
Faye
looks at him with tears streaming down his face. "My family will be protected.
I
gave you my word." Over the next 6 hours, 16 more German pilots defect using Basler's protocol. 11 miles 109s for FW-190s, and 1 more Mi-262. The intelligence haul is staggering. Not just the aircraft themselves, but the pilots' debriefings. They provide details on Luftwaffe fuel reserves nearly exhausted, morale catastrophic, and most critically the locations of hidden aircraft factories where Germany is still producing jets. The data from the Captured Me-262S is immediately shipped to the United States. Engineers at Wright Field in Ohio begin analyzing the jet engines, learning in days what would have taken years to develop independently.
The
intelligence directly contributes to the development of America's first operational jet fighters, which will be deployed in Korea just 5 years later. But the real impact is psychological. Within 48 hours, Radio Berlin is broadcasting frantic denials that German pilots are defecting. The Luftwaffe High Command issues orders, threatening execution for any pilot who surrenders. But the damage is done. German pilots now know there's a way out, and they know the Americans will protect
them.
Allied bomber losses on subsequent missions drop by 42%. Not because the Luftwaffe stops flying, but because German pilots stop pressing
attacks.
They're going through the motions, firing from extreme range, breaking off early. They're not trying to win anymore. They're trying to survive until they can find an American fighter leader broadcasting the defection protocol. On April 7, 1945, an entire staff of 9 Me-10s defects as a unit led by their commanding officer, Headman Friedrich Lang. Lang later testifies, "We heard the American broadcasts. We knew the war was lost. Colonel Basler gave us away to stop fighting without being murdered by the SS. He saved our lives and our honor." The final statistics are remarkable. Between March 18 and May 8, 1945, Operation Homecoming results in the defection of 63 German pilots and the capture of 58 intact aircraft, including 4 Me-262 jets. Allied bomber losses during this period are 38% lower than the previous 3 months. Estimated American lives saved between 400 and 600. Air crew. The complete story of Operation Homecoming includes dozens of individual pilot accounts and recently declassified documents. We've created a detailed documentary breakdown with maps, aircraft specifications, and pilot interviews available exclusively to channel members. Join now to access this premium content and support more deep dive historical investigations. May 15, 1945. 1 week after Germany's surrender, Robert Basler is called to Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force in Frankfurt. He assumes he's being debriefed on Operation Homecoming. Instead, he's escorted to a room where General Dwight Eisenhower is waiting. "Colonel Basler, I've reviewed the intelligence reports from your defection program. The Joint Chiefs estimate your operation shortened the war by several weeks and saved hundreds of American lives. I'm authorized to award you the Distinguished Service Cross and recommend you for promotion to full colonel." Basler stands at attention, uncomfortable with the attention. "Sir, I was just
doing my job.
My pilots deserve the credit, not me." Eisenhower smiles
Slightly.
"Your pilots will also be decorated, but this recognition is specifically for you." The president himself has been briefed on Operation Homecoming. "Sir, with respect, I'd prefer not to receive any medals for this." Eisenhower's smile fades. "Excuse me, sir. What we did worked because German pilots trusted us. They believed we'd protect them. If this becomes public, if my name gets attached to it, their families in Germany could face retaliation. The war is over, but there are still Nazi loyalists who'd see this as betrayal. I gave those pilots my word they'd be safe. That includes keeping this quiet." Eisenhower studies him for a long moment. "You understand you're turning down one of the highest military honors?" "Yes, sir. But I gave my word." The Distinguished Service Cross is awarded to Basler in a closed ceremony with no press, no publicity, no official record. He accepts it, then immediately requests it be sealed in his classified service record. Over the next 40 years, he'll be offered the Silver Star, the Legion of Merit, and numerous other decorations for Operation Homecoming. He refuses them all. The operation itself remains classified until 1985, when the Air Force Historical Research Agency begins declassifying World War II psychological warfare operations. By then, Basler is 64 years old, retired, and living quietly in Arizona.
When reporters finally track him down to
ask about Operation Homecoming, his response is characteristically modest. I was just a fighter pilot who figured out a better way to win. The real heroes were the German pilots who had the courage to quit when quitting was the hardest thing they could do. Hans Fay, the first Me-262 pilot to defect, immigrates to the United States in 1952. He becomes an aerospace engineer and works on the development of the F-86 Saberjet. In 1986, he attends a reunion of Operation Homecoming participants and meets Basler for the first time since the war. Their conversation is brief. Fay simply says, "Because of you, I lived to have children and grandchildren. Because of you, I came home." Basler's response, "You came home because you had the courage to choose life over ideology. I just gave you the opportunity." The defection protocols developed by Basler become the foundation for modern combat search and rescue procedures. The concept of real-time communication with enemy forces during combat operations, once considered illegal and impossible, is now standard doctrine. Every military pilot today is trained in defection protocols and safe passage procedures that trace their lineage directly back to Basler's unauthorized experiment over Berlin in March 1945. The captured Mi-262 jets provided technical intelligence that accelerated American jet development by an estimated 3 to 5 years. The engine designs influenced the development of the Pratt & Whitney J-48, which powered the F-94 Starfire, America's first operational jet fighter. That technology advantage saved American lives in Korea and established U.S. air superiority for the next generation. But perhaps the most important legacy of Operation Homecoming is philosophical. Basler proved that even in war, there are alternatives to killing, that creativity and courage can save more lives than firepower, and that sometimes the most effective weapon is simply giving your enemy a way to stop fighting. Robert Basler died in 2003 at age 82. His obituary in the New York Times made no mention of Operation
Homecoming.
The classification had been lifted, but Basler had requested privacy to protect the families of the German pilots who'd trusted him. His final request was that no military honors be displayed at his funeral. Just a simple headstone with his name, rank, and dates of service. But at the funeral, 63 men and women attended, the children and grandchildren of the German pilots who defected using his protocol. They came from Germany, Austria, and across the United States, and they each placed a single white rose on his casket. Because sometimes the greatest military achievement isn't destroying the enemy, it's giving them a reason to stop being your enemy. And sometimes the truest measure of a hero is not the medals he earned, but the ones he refused. Because he knew that real honor isn't about recognition. It's about keeping your word to men who trusted you with their lives.